time to go to bed. It's time for bed. Poop.
Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be doing the first plan, read, review style video. I intend to have be a video series here on my channel where at the end of every single week I have one of these videos go up, and it is essentially a TBR and a wrap up all in one. And at the end of the month, either the last Sunday of the month or the first Sunday of the following month, I will have, in place of a plan, read, review, a wrap-up style video. And in those, I can talk about the things that I haven't had the chance to talk about just yet, as well as let you know some other things that maybe I have talked about more in depth in certain other videos, so directory style. That's what the wrap-ups will be. For today, because this is the first video of the style, and because I haven't had a chance to do a traditional wrap-up style video in a while, I've done a new releases wrap-up recently, but not a traditional wrap-up. I'm primarily just going to be doing the wrap-up portion of this, but in future plan, read, reviews, we will be planning at the beginning. We'll be looking at what do I have in from the library, what audiobooks are in on apps like Libby or Hoopla, and what are highest priority, what live shows do I have coming up. So we'll have a planning portion at the beginning, and every now and then I'll take you with me to the library. We'll go pick up some of the holds and that kind of thing, so there'll be a little bit more of a vlog style content incorporated into the video. And then on a different day, I will do the end of the video, which is the review portion, talking about my thoughts on the books that I have picked up. So I'll still include some aspects of the library. To start, I'll say that the two things that I had from the library that I had to get around to recently were Silver Under Nightfall, not the physical copy, but the audiobook I had through the app Libby, and then the book Untethered Sky. It's actually a novella by Fonda Lee. It is a new release by that author, and I checked out the physical copy and I got the audiobook from the library, but my novella, the physical copy, it said I had renews left on the library's website, but then it immediately said that it was overdue. So I think it's a situation where it was a new release, and so it doesn't allow you to renew it, but usually it will say I have 0 renews. So I don't know if there was an error in the system, but I was like, okay, I gotta read this now. And I'll start by talking about Untethered Sky. I really enjoyed this. So I've talked before about Jade City by this author. On paper, perfect. Exactly what I want in a fantasy. There's the familial drama. There's the interesting character examinations. There's a plot, but it's more character focused. I like the fact that the setting is a little different than what you traditionally see in fantasy. It's more urban fantasy, but it is still a fantasy world. The magic was really cool. It has to do with Jade. All these things on paper, I'm like, mwah, chef's kiss. It's exactly what I want. And then it didn't click with me for a number of reasons. Primarily, I didn't really like the characters, and that was a bummer because I liked everything else, but the characters really, they just weren't as interesting to follow as I wanted them to be. So many other people find them so dynamic and fascinating, and so that is a very unpopular opinion, but I was irritated with them. So it's not that I thought they were poorly written, I just was like, I don't want to keep reading about these people. But I still thought it was well written, and so I was actually really excited for Untethered Sky, and I think I try to avoid seeing what other people think when it comes to new releases. It's important that I try not to let myself be too influenced by early reviews or when people are getting arcs, or just even once something's been put out and people are starting to do reviews. I try to avoid looking at it so that when I go into it, it is truly my thoughts on it. So after reading it, I was like, I really loved this. And I'm like, I bet people don't like how short it is because it's a novella, and that's usually the situation. And as fantasy fans, we are so accustomed to, oh, this book is 500 pages? That's not that long. When most people find 500 pages to be long, and 500 pages is pretty tame when it comes to fantasy. I mean, obviously, where's Stormlight? On my shelves. I was looking for Stormlight. I guess some of them are right there, the split editions, but the paperbacks are up there, so you can't see them. But, I mean, Stormlight's a perfect example. I'm so stupid. I have a copy of one of the Stormlight books in my hand. So Stormlight, we're accustomed to the chunky books. And so when we get a novella, I think instinctively we're like, this is too short. I thought it was exactly the amount of time that it needed to be, or the page count that it needed to be. I do think that the ending was rather abrupt, but the story within that novella, the story that was being told, I thought enough was said. I don't think it needed to be drawn out. I don't know if this is just, I've grown more accustomed to shorter things recently as a result of reading more T. Kingfisher, who does write shorter books. Nettle and Bone was very short. I read The Crane Husband and loved it. So I don't know if I'm growing to like this or if I think maybe this is just a great example of it done well. But I thought it was done really well. I thought it was very cinematic. The setup is that we follow this young woman who, as a child, something happened. I don't want to say too much because it is so short that if you say too much, I feel like you reveal the whole thing. But something happened that was rather tragic involving a manticore. And so for a lot of her life, she has dreamed of becoming somebody who has this bond with things called rocks, which are like these awesome giant falcon type birds. They don't ride them, but they, if you've ever watched people that have falcons that, you know, fly to them and then they hunt alongside them, it's that concept, except for the birds are huge. And so the birds are really the only thing that can fight these manticores. So our main character, Esther, she is somebody who has always wanted to become bonded with one of these rocks, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed that it didn't feel the need to linger. I thought the world was really interesting. I liked the hunt aspect of it. I liked the brutality, in a sense, of trying to tame this creature that is otherwise meant to be wild, and what that demands of the animal and what it demands of the person and what it demands on them to be hunters of these killers, these manticores. I thought it was great. I liked our main character. I liked the world. I liked the setup. And I haven't really read too many other things like it. Like I said before, I do feel like it just ended, though. The end was a little abrupt, but I didn't mind because I'm like, well, I mean, we could have tried to like talk through the events at the end a little more and stuff, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't know that I really needed that. I do kind of want Fonda Lee to write more in this world because I really liked the world, and I would love to see references to the, if not the characters, then at least these hunters. I think it'd be cool to reference them. I don't know. I just thought it was really cool. It felt like I was reading a prequel to another story, or actually what it felt like is when you read a trilogy or you read a series and then you get a sidequel, sometimes they're referred to as, or maybe an actual prequel, and it's shorter, and it just kind of, you're like, oh wow, it's so cool to see the origin of this character or the origin of this guild or whatever the case may be. It felt like that, except for we're starting there. So I hope that she'll write more in this because I think it would be really cool, but I also was perfectly fine to just read that novella. I really liked it. I do, though, think other people are going to find it to be a little short. So anyway, I got around to that, and then I could immediately return it to my library since it was considered overdue. I wanted to mention Words of Radiance. I did do the in-depth discussion with my friends, so if you are interested in seeing spoiler thoughts on this, then I'll have that video linked. But it has been so lovely rereading Stormlight Archive. I had lots of thoughts as I was reading through it, as you can see from the tabs. And my friend Sarah from Fairy Reads, she said, and I agree with this, that this book feels the most like its predecessor of any of the Stormlight books, meaning Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are the most alike in the sense of discovery of things to do with the magic and the getting to know the characters, seeing the characters' plot lines slowly intertwine, the level of, this is going to sound strange because it's epic from the beginning, but it feels like the first two are a little bit more focused in, and it feels like books 3 and 4 open up a lot. And so it just feels like book 1 and book 2 are almost their own arc in a sense. And then I think book 3 feels like its own and book 4 feels like its own. It doesn't really feel like those two are an arc, but it does feel like the first two in a sense are. And the first time I read this series, book 1 and book 4 were my favorites, and now I'm like, I don't know, they're all so good. So I really, really, really enjoyed my reread of this, And I think that there's so much, and this is going to sound stupid because it's obvious, but there's so much you don't know. Okay, I'm laughing at how dumb this is about to sound. There's so much that the first time you read it, you don't know. And then once you do know, it's better. That's such an obvious statement, but some of the foreshadowing or some of the world building details, or there's a group of antagonists in the story called the Parshendi. And so once you have more information later in the story by reading on, when you go back to reread it, I feel like it's easier to focus on them. And because you have that knowledge, then it makes the rereadability even better. So I have absolutely loved going back and reading this again. I've loved seeing the way that certain characters, even in their backstory chapters and the flashback sequences, when you are like, oh my gosh, all the reveals, and then you see hints of, you're like, there were more reveals, and it was hinted at, even within all these other reveals, and it's just really cool to see how everything is done. I think Sanderson, whether you're a fan or not, because I know a lot of you are not necessarily fans of Sanderson, but I know a lot of you are, and I think that he does the rereading factor better than a lot of others because of the fact that he's known to be heavily a plotter. That came out really odd. I don't know what I was trying to say. He plots a lot. That's what I was trying to say. He's known for thinking through, and I think he's even said with his writing process that the plotting takes the longest. And then once he's done that, then the writing goes by very fast because he knows everything that he's going to do. And because he knows what he's going to do, he can leave all those little footprints along the way that you don't even realize there's a path there until after you've gotten to the end, and then you see it, and you see all the foreshadowing, and you see all the hints, and you see everything along the way that you're like, oh my gosh, how did I not see it? And it's so interesting too because there's certain things, I think in Mistborn it was more true than in this, but there's certain things that you're like, it's so obvious when you're rereading it again. Like, how does nobody see this even though you literally didn't see it the first time? So it's just been great. It's been great rereading it. And Words of Radiance specifically in Stormlight is known for having, I think, some of the most quotable, like, yes, type of moments in the series. So getting to see those moments again was great. Last book for today will be Silver Under Nightfall. This is, I did a sprint over on World Hoppers, and somebody was saying, because I was like, it's very much giving me Castlevania vibes, and someone's like, yeah, it's Castlevania fan fiction of basically like, what if the three characters, if you've seen the Netflix Castlevania, it's like, what if Alucard, Trevor, and Sypha all wanted to bang? And you're like, yep, that's this book. So if that sounds good to you, that's what this book is. And then the plot line is a little different than what you find in Castlevania. The setup is that we have, I'm going to pause for a second. The character of Remy in this book is clearly Trevor from Castlevania, Trevor Belmont. His family, Remy's family, is known for being vampire hunters, and the weapon that he uses, which he calls Breaker, is basically Trevor's weapon. So anyway, Trevor / Remy is our main character, and he is somebody who is a reaper or a vampire hunter. There is a rather tension-filled relationship between the humans that are nobility, royalty, the decision makers of their kingdom. There's a lot of tension between them and the vampire courts, but there are some vampire courts where there's various different allies or treaties or such things that make it so that they can live in relative peace with one another. However, there are rogue vampires, and there are still those out there that certain courts that are much more violent towards humans, and so the Reapers, the vampire hunters, are necessary. Main character, like I said, Remy, is one of these Reapers, and he ends up having to ally with two vampires that are together. Those two are together, that he has to ally himself with to try and determine what or who is behind something known as the rot, which is this thing that is occurring with fallen vampires that is bringing them back to life. And it's very difficult to kill them, permanently kill them. Each time they come back to life, they become more and more and more monstrous and more likely to go into a feeding frenzy and cause a lot of harm to human beings. And at times cause a lot of issues with vampires as well. So they're trying to get to the bottom of this. The first half of the book-ish, I would say, I really liked it. I was really into... I thought the nods to Castlevania were not a deal breaker necessarily. I thought some of them were a little too close for my liking, but I thought the plot was unique and different enough. And the character that is essentially the Sypha character, she is a vampire, not a magic wielder. And so that character was different. Her personality and how she interacts with the other two characters is still kind of similar, but regardless, I was like, okay, I still think that the plot is interesting. I do think that it very much feels inspired by Castlevania. Once the blueprint of the characters, once that's been established and we just focus on what makes this book unique and separate from Castlevania, I actually feel like that's when my like of it started to go down, because the second half of the story is so much more about the relationship between the characters and the romantic tension that's building. And I liked the tension building in the first half, and then the second half, it was like we went from there being like subtle, I think these characters are into each other. It went from subtle to just the characters being like, I want to have sex with you, basically. Like, they were pretty much telling Remy, like, we want to both have sex with you. And that's kind of like the second half of the book. And so I'm like, can we get back to the rot plotline? And I was fine with the characters. I was fine with this, like, edgy setting that we have and, like, the moodiness of the characters. I was down with all of that, and I liked, like I said before, the subtle looks and the, like, oh, I think there's something. I was fine with all of that, but then once it became such a focus in the book, other characters, other vampires, other people that are humans and that interact with Remy, like, everybody's like, you guys are all sleeping together, huh? And it was just so much of a focus. The second half of the book, it became very much about the relationship between the characters, and then the plot kind of got to a point where I thought it was going to end, and there was, I think, around 100 pages left, and it kind of had a lot happen all at once, and I was a little bummed because I liked the first half, but the second half just didn't really end up working for me. So it's probably not a series I'm going to continue on with. I also do think that the nods to Castlevania are maybe some very big nods where I was hoping for just kind of like a little head tilt in the direction of Castlevania, if that makes sense. I said in a video I did over on my side channel, Full Meta Analysis, because it's related to Castlevania, and I was doing a video discussion about when things feel like they're honoring something else by having these nods. And then also when we get to the extremes of, like, is this fan fiction? And just a very open-ended conversation of, like, what are your thoughts? And in this, my end thought when it came to this was, I just want to go back and watch Castlevania now. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on the books that I talked about, and let me know what you've been reading. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Luna. Sean. Oh, look, both at the same time. Luna Bear. Smile. Luna. Luna Bear. Sean, look at